Matthew chapter 6, beginning at verse 9, we read these words. I'm reading from the English Standard Version. Pray then like this. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. And I'd like to believe that there is not a cross-carrying, committed Christian among us who would say that prayer is unimportant. Of all the points and the topics that Jesus touches upon in the Sermon on the Mount, this inclusion of prayer is a real important one. Prior to this, I'm not sure that there are any such instructions given on how to pray, but Jesus right here gives instructions. And what I plan to do is, instead of just rushing through the Lord's Prayer, as we like to refer to it, I plan to parse it out and break it down into 5 different messages. This is the first. I want to take it line by line, verse by verse. Now, it's only 5 verses long, if you notice, and we sometimes refer to it as the Lord's Prayer, which is a misnomer because it's not a prayer that the Lord prayed. It is a prayer instruction that he gives to us, to his followers, as to how we should pray. It's not uncommon for people to recommend that we pray from the extremely religious to the extremely secular. You see people saying, hey, we should pray. Even the agnostic and even sometimes the atheist, when there is a tragic event that takes place, would say, let's pray. They don't have a problem with prayer being uttered at a wedding or as last rites over the deceased. So even they would allow for the Lord's Prayer. Now, the reason that they do that is because they don't view it. Not everyone views the Lord's Prayer in the same way that Christians view the Lord's Prayer. Not everyone takes the instructions that Jesus gives here in the same way. And what I'd like to suggest is that his words, Christ's words leading up, that's the words prior to verse 9, his words leading up to this prayer suggest the type of people to whom this prayer refers, to whom the instructions that he is given, that he's giving here, that it refers to. In other words, this is what I'm saying. This prayer instruction that Jesus gives is not just for any and everybody. It's not. And so what I'd like to do is give you 7 types of people for whom this prayer is not intended. That's the first thing I'd like to do. 7 types of people for whom this prayer instruction is not intended. And then I'd like to give you a few people for whom it is intended. So here's the first one. This prayer is not for the only in an emergency people. In the aftermath of almost disaster, you can see a news reporter go and talk to people and they say, you know what, we need to pray. We need to pray. In the event of a catastrophic event, the president of the nation may say, we need to pray. The nation needs to pray. Even a non-religious person in the aftermath of a certain event, a tragic event, would say, hey, we need to pray. Now, don't get me wrong. If you're a believer and you find yourself in an emergency, pray. You should pray, but an emergency should not be the only time that you pray to God. But if you're an unbeliever and you say pray, the question becomes, to whom are you praying? If you don't believe in the God who created the universe, to whom are your prayers directed? Now, there is one exception in terms of an unbeliever praying. And it is when an unbeliever prays a prayer of faith, if you will, to say, Lord, I'm sorry. I've recognized that I'm a sinner and I'm in need of a Savior. God hears the prayer of that sinner. If he did not, then none of us would be saved. So with that exception, God hears the prayers of a repentant, contrite sinner who submits themselves to Christ. But otherwise, no sinner can be saved if God didn't hear sinner's prayer. But apart from this, the act of praying in and of itself, devoid of God, doesn't do a thing for you. I know that's hard news to take. This instruction that Jesus gives is not for the only in emergency people. Here's a second type of person that this prayer instruction is not for. This prayer is not for the magic formula people. It seems that some people see prayer as the magic formula to get their desired results. Prayer is not a magic bullet designed to take out the people who offend you. If it were, there would probably be some people right now just dropping dead in the audience, because they offended you somewhere along the line and you're praying, God, get them. David prayed some prayers like that. God, get them. I've prayed some prayers like that. God, get them. And then I come up on the platform the next Sunday and you're still here. It's not meant to be a magic formula, not to be used as a fix-it formula for the things that you consistently and constantly break with no thought of the consequences of what you're doing. It's not how it's to be used. By the way, it's not to be used as some kind of magic formula for the faith-healing evangelist who claims to have a connection with God that you don't have, and you got to come to his crusade in order to get it. That's not the faith. That's not what it's for. It's not a magic formula. Now, it's okay to pray for comfort. It's okay to pray for healing. This prayer is not to be used as a psychic, immaterial mysticism that brings to fruition some type of comfort or psychological comfort or physical healing. You can't just use it for that and never pray any other time. It's okay to pray for comfort and healing, but remember, this prayer is not a magic formula used to activate an immaterial deity. Instead, it is a faith formula used to cultivate a relationship with the omnipotent God. The third type of person whom this prayer is not for, this prayer is not for the spiritualist. I was thinking about how prayer is defined in secular settings, and I ran across this definition. It says that prayer is an invocation or act that seeks to activate a rapport with an object of worship through deliberate communication. You're seeking to activate an object of worship. It goes on to say, or an act of supplication or intercession directed toward a deity or a deified ancestor. You see, when prayer is defined this way, the spiritualist has no problem with you praying to dead ancestors or to your deceased grandmother. I love my grandmother. My grandparents were something else. I will put them up against anybody's grandparents. Love those people. But I don't pray to them. But the spiritualist has no problem with that. The spiritualist has no problem with you praying to rocks and animals and water and things in nature because they believe that deities exist within those things. The spiritualist has no problem with you praying to any other thing rather than the God of the universe. But this prayer that is given by Jesus, this instruction that he gives is for people who believe in God, but not just any God. In Ephesians chapter 4, Paul says there's one Lord, there's one Spirit. He says there's one God. He goes on to say who is over all and through all and in all, but don't you get it twisted. You need to recognize that the all to whom he refers are all those who have believed on the Lord Jesus Christ. It's not just anybody to whom he's referring to. Here's the fourth person that this prayer is not for. This prayer is not for the universalist. At one time, the Unitarians and the Universalists were separate groups. I studied Universalism a little bit when I was in Bible college, and one of our projects was to go to one of these world religions and attend their service. And I went to a Universalist church, sat in their service. I'm surprised that they didn't say, hey, that's a Christian, because of the halo glowing over my head. But apparently they didn't notice. The building, by the way, is a remarkable building. It exists in Oak Park, Illinois, because it was built by that great architect whose name escapes me right now. Frank Lloyd Wright. Frank Lloyd Wright built the building where they worship. But they worship any God. The Universalist, Unitarian, doesn't have any problem with you praying to any God because it's universal. Whoever your God is that you pray to is absolutely fine. There are more prayers offered to the universe than there are offered to the God of the Bible. I mean, we hear it all the time. The universe has something for you. The universe has a special thing happening in your life. The universe. It's remarkable to me. Of course, I've been tainted by the fact that I have committed my life to Christ and like many of you and know that God is the creator of all things. It's remarkable to me to hear people so adamant about praying to the universe instead of the one who made the universe. There is a fourth person who this prayer is not for, or a fifth, I should say. I think I'm on the fifth. By the way, concerning this universalist, did I say universalist? I did. When I think about this idea of just praying to the universe or praying to objects or things like that, it's good to pray. However, if your prayers are directed to just anyone, you're not praying to the God of the Bible. If you're okay with just saying, well, I can't tell you how many people have said to me and talked to me, not you, but throughout the years, hey, you're a Christian, yeah, hey, well, hey, our gods are God, your God is God and my God is God, and that's just okay. See, we're the same, see, that's not true. Because if you pray to anyone other than the God of the Bible, you are praying to the wrong person. And if you're praying to anything else, you're praying as a fool. Because inanimate objects cannot save you. They cannot redeem you. They cannot help you. And now the fifth, this prayer is not for the hypocrite. It's not for the hypocrite. One of the top reasons why people say that they won't go to church or that they won't accept Christ or believe in God is marked by one word, and the word is hypocrisy. Hypocrisy. And it's fair to say that the great majority of people don't like a faker. I mean, you ask yourself, you don't like people who are fake. You want people to be real with you. You want them to deal with you honestly and genuinely. There have been far too many fakers in both politics and in the pulpit. Too many. People do not like fake, and neither does God. And we know this because as it relates to prayer now, these verses that he says leading up to prayer, among the persons who is at the top of his negative list is the hypocrite. And the word hypocrite comes from the Greek, and it means actor, to play a role, to be disingenuous. So it refers to somebody who's just putting on a show. And we have some great showmen, even in the pulpit. Without there being genuineness, without there being honesty, many people are led astray. But simply put, a hypocrite lives a life that contradicts what they say they are. Specifically, Jesus instructs that this prayer is not for such persons. Look at chapter 6, verse 5. He says, and when you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites. Why? Because hypocrites are those who pretend to be something that they're not. They are disingenuous. Here's a word. It says they are dissemblers. Dissemblers. I like that word. I ran across it. And it means a person who dissembles the truth. And then they adjust it so that they can hide what they truly are. Hypocrites are dissemblers, plainly stated. Jesus says right here, he advises, do not be a hypocrite. And then there's another person who this prayer is not for. This prayer is not for the grandstander. It's not for the grandstander. Look again at Matthew chapter 6, verse 5. He says, and when you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, that they may be seen by others. It's as if some people have the attitude that, what good is it for me to be a good public prayer, but nobody knows about it? People need to know just how good I am, and so they throw theological words so you can know their theological thoughts and ideas and how advanced they are and the way that they pray. One sure sign, by the way, the biggest hypocrites were the Pharisees, right? And their whole thing was they separated themselves from others to show how holy they are, how pious they are. In fact, they took the Levitical laws and they added to them to the point there's more than 600 laws that you have to adhere to in order to be considered holy and accepted by God. And so they separated themselves. In fact, the Aramaic word from which we get the word Pharisees means to separate. And one sure sign that you may be in the wrong group is when a group wants you to separate from good people. The supremacist groups do it. Separate yourself. Cults do it. There are some religious groups that do it. But true Christianity is not a religion. It's about a relationship. We say it all the time. There's a few other thoughts. True Christianity is not something that asks you to separate from people. It asks you to separate from sin. It does ask you not to keep company with those who will drag you or tempt you back into sin. However, true Christianity also asks you to engage people so that they can come and trust the Lord. True Christianity does not say, I'm a saint and you're a sinner. That's not true Christianity. True Christianity says, I'm a sinner saved by grace and you're a sinner, but you can be saved by grace when you trust in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. That's true Christianity. The Pharisees were not these types of people. Now, I found this interesting in verse 5 of chapter 6. Jesus makes this interesting statement concerning the Pharisees, these grandstanders, these hypocrites. He says toward the end of verse 5, he says, truly I say to you, they have received their reward. And it indicates that these public praying hypocrites immediately receive their reward. That's an interesting statement. Now, the focus here is upon reward so that you don't get thrown off. I love what Richard T. France writes. He says the reward of ostentatious religion. That's flashy, flamboyant, showy religion. He says the reward of ostentatious religion is the human recognition for which it is seeking. But that is all. They have their reward. They're seeking public recognition, and they get that right away. They come off the platform, and people say, that was a good prayer. Oh, you did good. That was just amazing. But he goes on to say, however, they who exercise a religion done for human recognition shall not receive a reward from God. Jesus himself is telling us, leading up to, giving us these 5 verses on the Lord's Prayer. He's telling us the type of people who this prayer is not for. Here's the 7th one. This prayer is not for the ritualist. A review of religions will reveal that most religions include prayer. Some of them have a certain prayer posture. Some of them have a chant that you need to do to pray. Some of them require that you face a certain direction when you pray. You may, as a Christian, pray with your eyes closed and your hands clasped together, and that's okay if it helps you. But the thing is, don't do it to show the people who are around you. Do it because it helps you to make that connection with God. This prayer is not for the ritualist. I had a professor at Moody Bible Institute when I attended there. His name was Dr. Louis Barbieri. I loved that professor. I like that guy. And he's written several commentaries. One of the commentaries that he's written is a commentary on Matthew. And here's what my professor, Dr. Barbieri, wrote concerning this. He says, rather than making prayer a matter between an individual and God, the Pharisees had turned it into an act to be seen by men, to demonstrate their supposed righteousness. Their prayers were directed not to God, but to other men and consisted of long, repetitive phrases. Look what Jesus says in verse 7 now here of Matthew chapter 6. He says, and when you pray, do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do, for they think that they will be heard for their many words. Over the years, I've heard people pray like that from time to time. Thank God that in this church, I haven't heard anybody pray this way. Lord, you know, I really wanted to go to Famous Dave's after church. But bless these people who can't go to Famous Dave's. And Lord, if we do go to Famous Dave's, don't let it be crowded. You know, Lord, I served in teaching the 4 and 5-year-olds during church today. So let there be sweet tea when I get to Famous Dave. You know, I mean, you ever hear anybody pray and they're telling other people's business? You ever hear that, Lord? Thank you for this day. And that thing that Sister Smith shared with me about what was happening in her life and how she slapped her husband because he angered her. Lord, help Sister Smith's hand to heal. You know, I mean, this prayer instruction is not for people like that. But let me give you 3 people who I'd like to suggest that this prayer instruction is for. 3 types of people for whom this prayer is intended. Here's the first one. This prayer instruction is intended for God-fearers. We're instructed to begin, or at least to include, identification in our prayers. This is to say, identify to whom it is you're praying. Look at verse 9 of Matthew chapter 6. He says, pray then like this, our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. The person to whom our prayer is to be directed is to the Father. Don't get confused or twisted about to whom you are to be praying. You're not to be praying to the universe or thanking the universe or to nature or to your dead grandmother or grandfather, holy though they may have been. But he gives you instruction here. You know, people like to say, I'm our Father which art in heaven, and they pray that prayer, hey, I did that. No, he's giving you a guideline. He's giving you instruction, and within that instruction, he wants you to identify who it is to whom you are praying. The person to whom our prayers are to be directed is to our Father, and we fear the Father. In this context, it means we respect him. In this context, it means we have admiration for him. In this context, it means we have devotion to him. Now, you may have respect, and admiration and devotion to any person or any number of persons. But what makes the distinction is when you ask yourself, I have a lot of admiration and devotion for John. Man, that brother plays the keyboard. I love that brother. He helps me out. He talks to me. He straightens me out sometimes. I have admiration and devotion for him. I need to pray to John. Wait a minute. What separates it is when you ask yourself, did John make the sun, moon, and stars, Jupiter and Mars? Does John have a hell to save me from and a heaven to guarantee me? I don't think so. That's what draws the distinction. This prayer is for people who fear God, who respect God, who have reverence for God, who serve God the Father. Therefore, this instruction is for those types of people. Secondly, this prayer instruction is intended for Christ followers. And it's unmistakable. In verse 6, he says, but when you pray. Who is he talking to? First of all, he's talking to the disciples. Tells us at the beginning of the Lord's Prayer, it says that he goes up on a mountain to pray. At the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, I should say, he goes up on a mountain to pray. It says his disciples come to him. But we recognize the last time I was before you that at the end of chapter 4, he also indicates there's a multitude there. So secondly, he's talking to the followers who are following him. And thirdly, he's addressing those who have believed, who fear God. And fourthly, I like to suggest to you that he is addressing those who will come to believe. This prayer instruction is intended for Christ followers. We can reasonably conclude that. We can theologically conclude that. He's not giving these instructions to people who are out there worshiping, rocks and hills and the water. And he's talking to those Christ followers. He's talking to God-fearers. And thirdly, this prayer instruction is intended for the Father's children. It's for the Father's children. In verse 6, Matthew chapter 6, he says, but when you pray, go into your room, shut the door, and pray to the Father. Who did he say to pray to? Not Bugs Bunny. I don't know why Bugs Bunny came to mind. I'm kind of thinking about watching cartoons when I go home, I like Bugs Bunny. But that's not who he says in the text there. I don't know how people get some things twisted. I don't know how some pastors and Christians get things twisted from the Word of God. It's right there. You go and you pray to the Father. These instructions cannot be given to those who do not worship the Father, because that's who he said you're supposed to be praying to. If you try to give, it would be like taking a $1 million pearl necklace and throwing it out in front of a herd of hogs to be trampled into the mud. If you give this instruction to someone who is not the children of the Father, because pigs don't have a need for pearl necklaces. And frankly, the person who does not worship the Father, who does not fear God, who does not follow Christ, they don't have a need for this kind of truth. They don't understand it. Now, should they come to faith in Christ, then this prayer instruction is for them. But Jesus is talking to people who understand, you are my children. So when you pray to the Father. It wouldn't be valuable to anybody else. Well, I told you I wasn't going to take this too long, so I still have 30 minutes worth, but he just told me to preach, so it's going to be on him. He's like, so what are we to gather from this instruction? Let me bring it to a close like this. I think that Jesus, in context, is telling us about the types of prayers we are to be. Prayer, using it as if it's the name of a person. How are we to be in light of what Jesus has said? I'm going to have to push that to next time what type of prayers we are to be. But let me close with this, keeping in mind the words of Walter B. Smith from 1826 or something like that. When I was at Moody, we sang a number of different songs during our chapel worship. And we did really old hymns, but we also did contemporary worship. I mean, after all, it is a college filled with young people. But one of the songs that they used to sing that just really stirred my heart reminded me that prayer is about finite, limited beings praying to an omnipotent God who is, in Smith's words, immortal, invisible, God only wise, in light, inaccessible, now hid from our eyes, most blessed, most glorious, the Ancient of Days, almighty, victorious. It's your great name that we praise. And the fact that you have access without going through a priest, without going through your pastor, without going through some spiritual, hyper-spiritual person, that you have direct access to the Father. So now tell me what the problem is that you're trying to deal with. Tell me the person that you're trying to deal with. Tell me the issue that is getting you all twisted up. And my answer to you is pray to your Father. Take it to Him. I can't wait till I get to the church to ask pastor to pray. No, you should be praying before you get to the church because you have direct access to the Father. He's talking to you who fears the Lord. He's talking to you who one day, somewhere on your spiritual journey, you decided, I see what Jesus did for me. I believe it. I trust in Him. So now you're a Christ follower. He's talking to you. And you became a child of the Father the moment that you trusted in Christ. And so to you, Jesus sits on the side of a mountain and He says, pray this way. Our Father, who's in heaven, holy be your name. Sorry, but that just gets in my spirit. Holy be your name. Go ahead. Pray to the Father because He's the only one who is able to deliver you and keep you until He comes again. Amen.